You've been hacked. Words you probably never want to hear, but either have or will in the future because it really is inevitable at this point in time. Like they say in the industry, it's not a matter of if you'll get hacked, it's a matter of when. Welcome, good morning to Small Business Matters, where we talk about all things small business, and we talk about, of course, the entrepreneurs that make these companies go and grow. Today we have a cybersecurity guru. His name is Felipe Isaza from Function. Felipe, thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you for having me, Carlos.
Really appreciate it. Before we get into this crazy world that is cybersecurity and all these things you hear every day about cyber threats and big companies, I mean, you hear the big companies getting hacked all the time, consumer information. I want to know about you personally a little bit and about your entrepreneurial journey. How did it all start? Were you, where did you go to school? Did you go to school? Because nowadays, you can go to YouTube University and get your degree there. But how did it all start? How did Function all come to be?
Sure. Where do I start? So I think it all started when in sixth grade, actually, my entrepreneur. So basically, what I would do is I would convince my mom to take me to Costco to buy candy, Airheads specifically.
Okay.
So I would take them back to school, sell them for $0.25, great margins. But all that changed until I started consuming my own product.
Okay.
So after that, I would start over a period of years, obviously. I started washing cars. I would get my neighborhood friends to help me so that I can start cutting grass as well. So I would have car wash and cutting lawns at the same time.
What age were you at that point?
That was probably probably from 12 to 15 or 16 years old.
Okay.
And then after that, obviously, my first job out of college was in IT.
Okay.
I worked for a small company and then grew from there. Worked with Writer as well until now. I have my own company.
Okay.
In cyber.
What made you make that jump to start your own company? I mean, you had some entrepreneurial experience as a kid, really. What made you make that jump? You leave a secure job, a salary.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's for me. I've always been a go-getter. I kind of leap before I crawl type of approach. So protecting customers is my primary focus right now. I saw a gap and trends before I started my business, which is why I'm here today, so I can provide those services to our customers now.
Okay. How has that worked for you? I love that statement. It's what was it? Leap before?
I leap before I crawl.
Leap before you crawl. How has that worked out? And do you have any specific instances of when you've taken that leap, other than starting a small business?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you the story when I started the business, exact moment that relates to my wife. So I was working for a managed service provider as well, and I was probably 2.5 years into it. And I was just kind of stressed, overwhelmed, exhausted, the long hours, and I was doing it for somebody else. So for me, at that point, I'm like, man, if I put this amount of time into my own business, I have to be successful. So that morning, I called my wife. She didn't pick up. I was at work. She didn't pick up. And she called me in the afternoon, and she's like, hey, what happened? I'm like, oh, it's too late. I quit. I called you to tell you that I was, what are your thoughts were to quit and this and that. And she's like, oh, my God. She started freaking out. And I'm like, don't worry, it'll be okay. I had no plan.
Okay.
But
awesome. That's a great story.
Yeah.
So how did you acquire that first customer? What did you have to do?
It was tough, but it came from a referral. Somebody that was expressing distress in their business, their existing IT. They said, hey, call Felipe. I met with them, and that was kind of like the first customer. I still have like a picture of the check.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was interesting. I knew it was going to be a good story one day.
So you started in IT, not necessarily cybersecurity. Did both go hand in hand from the very beginning, or did you?
Business?
Yeah.
So it first started as IT. Cyber wasn't prevalent, as prevalent as it is now, that era. But first, break fix stuff, fixing computers, managing servers, the basic backups stuff. You would never see like two-factor authentication. So there was like a very rudimentary baseline back then in terms of IT.
Okay, so not even two-factor authentication back then.
Back then, it wasn't very common, at least.
You mentioned the words managed service provider, and that's what you are. What does that mean for people who don't understand that term?
Right. So it's more of a proactive approach, getting ahead of things before you're reactive and down scenarios. A server, you can detect hardware issues, space issues, anything that you can prevent productivity issues for a customer, basically.
Okay. So obviously, you're a cybersecurity guru, and I was curious because you hear about all the big players that something happens, Facebook being one of them. Facebook, as a matter of fact, I just heard this morning, is being slapped with some other accusations of, data privacy violations, or, just not taking care of their house very well. But does it happen to small businesses?
Look, the threat landscape is forever changing. No business is too small to be a target. Definitely, they're all exposed. I'll tell you a perfect quick side story. I had a customer CPA, small firm, that we performed the CSRA, what we call cybersecurity review assessment.
Okay.
I presented him the risk, and basically he rejected my offerings. He had the attitude of, I'm small. Hackers don't need anything or want anything that I have. And he would constantly tell me, remove all my passwords. I don't want to deal with passwords.
Okay.
Obviously, I refused to do that.
Right.
Long story short, one Saturday morning at 7 a.m., he calls me, hey, Felipe, I can't access my accounting software. I can't open Word docs. At that moment, I knew it was a breach incident.
Okay.
So I proceeded to log into the server. I saw the screen flickering, and then I noticed the icons, file extensions changing and the format changing. At that moment, I shut down the server and proceeded to explain to him the situation. So as we did some discoveries, to see what the effects were, it attacked the backups as well. So basically, he was vulnerable. So we then had to negotiate with the threat actor.
Okay.
So on the server, they always leave like a little note with next steps and how to contact them. So I proceeded to create like a different email so I can start communicating and negotiating. And it ended up being about $4,500 in Bitcoin.
Okay.
So we got the decryptor. We were able to salvage probably 95% of the files. And then, obviously, he's almost back to 100% in business, but that's kind of like the area of concerns for that.
So I'm curious, once one of these cryptors comes in and, you've got ransomware in your server, how does that work? I mean, in that instance, that threat actor release the information, or how does that work?
So it's funny because what they do is they'll email you the decryptor,
Okay.
And then you just install that in the server.
Got it.
And that goes ahead and decrypts the encrypted files. It amazes me, this industry. Obviously, you know how big ransomware. It's like $1 billion industry. The threat actor, once we decrypted the files, the threat actor follows up with me. He's like, "Hey, Felipe, were you able to decrypt the files okay?" The level of customer service they provide is amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and he's like, "Hey, anything else I can do for you? Thank you for your services." I was like shocked on how, but it makes total sense being a $1 billion industry.
That's incredible. So what happened after that? I suspect that this CPA started to listen to you after that?
Oh, absolutely. He implemented everything I would offer to him. So he's basically secure at this point with redundancy in place and all that.
Yeah. It's funny about you mentioned. Did you know that today is World Password Day?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's World Password Day, and it's all about safeguarding your password
right.
and all those kinds of things. I'm one of those that sometimes it's just I feel it's such a pain. Getting the code. After you
Right.
put your password in, getting the code and forgetting it, not getting it in time, and
Right.
all that
It's
rigmarole.
the necessary evil,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. So you recommend that to everybody. Talk about passwords a little bit, and since it's National Pass or World Password Day. What should simple steps? How should a password be? What shouldn't you do with passwords?
Well, I think as a rule of thumb, if you remember your password, you might as well hacked. So I think password managers are a good form to address that. That way it allows it to come up with, 30, 40 character long alphanumeric approach, so that you don't have to remember it. And if you're repeating passwords, that's another issue as well.
So that means using it for different accounts.
Right. So
Okay,
now if your bank account, if your email gets hacked and then you have the same password for your bank account, then you lose your fund. Not only do you lose access to your emails, but now you lose your funds
that's not good.
at all. So password managers is a good way, and two-factor authentication, obviously, like you mentioned, that second layer definitely helps and goes a long way to reduce that risk.
Okay. So talking about these password managers, what about the native one in Google Chrome, for example, the browser? You recommend that or not?
So I do not recommend that because it's in plain text. So as part of my assessment, what I do is we generate a script to basically pull username and passwords in plain text from browsers. So as part of my assessment, I print out, however pages it is, and I present that to them in an envelope. And basically, it's URL, username, and passwords in plain text for everything that they've ever used. So even their wife's stuff, and that can be detrimental in the long term of things.
Incredible. So what other steps can a small business take to protect themselves against cyber criminals? And you're right, Felipe. I have heard just all kinds of businesses, large and small, getting hacked and getting implanted with ransomware. And I know, I guess backup is real important. That's one step. So
Right.
how should people back up?
Well, what we do is what insurance companies are mandating now is the 3-2-1 rule. So basically, 3 copies of backups, whether it be one on premise and 2 in the cloud, or 2 on premise, one being air gapped and one in the cloud. So
What does
having
air
everything.
gap mean?
Basically, a backup that's performed locally, and then just basically disconnected, where
Okay.
it's just not being accessed by any other device, especially that's on the internet.
Okay. Interesting. What else can they do? I'm a small, your CPA firm. What are some things that they implemented to protect themselves besides the backup? What else?
So I think most important is just to understand, educate, and secure. Every business has different needs to protect. So basically, other than the 2 that I mentioned, implementing a firewall is a good way to protect the perimeter that has UTM, Unified Threat Management. Basically, you're blocking IPs, whitelisting, blacklisting, stuff like that to further reduce your risk. So, in terms of protection, understanding what you have is super important so that you don't over protect. That is a factor as well, because you could impact productivity for the business. So understanding that and just implementing layers of security where it doesn't impact is probably the approach.
Okay. One term that comes up a lot I hear is phishing, but with a PH.
Right.
What is phishing?
So you got different ones:
Okay.
phishing, smishing,
Okay.
which is texting, SMS, phishing. So basically, phishing, which is part of our assessment as well, is basically their campaigns or emails that are received to you that resemble similar content or vendors that you use, such as Microsoft, Zoom during the pandemic. That was a big one. And as part of our assessment, we curate these phishing campaigns around these measures so that we can collect data and then present it to the owner. Hey, look, you think you're not a risk, but every single person in your organization basically opened this. And then we can track it further. Like, and not only did they open it, they further inputted to click on the link and input their information. So now they divulge their username and password, and now they have access to your email, basically.
Yeah, they are getting so good. And one of the things I've learned is to look at the email address where it came from.
Right.
Because a lot of times, I just got one a couple days ago from Facebook, and it's a very common type of email I may get from them. They'll say, since I manage a bunch of different accounts, they'll say, we see that you have a possible copyright violation on one of your posts. If you want to contest this, click through. And I know I don't have any copyright violations. It's all original content. So, it was interesting. And right away, I mean, I was tempted to click, but wait a minute, I know I don't have any copyrighted content. And I looked at the email address, and sure enough, it was it had Facebook in there, but just some kind of crazy address.
It's definitely easy to get confused with those emails. And like you said, they're getting so good at replicating. In the past, it was basically emails, and you could tell with the signature, had like different fonts and colors
Right.
and stuff like that. But now they're basically copying and pasting. So just to avoid that. So definitely getting good at that.
So along with that comes another term I've heard is social engineering. What's that all about?
So yeah, basically, and what we're cognizant about as a cybersecurity firm. So it's easy for somebody to call in, pretend that they're one of our customers, just to get any type of, hey, I need to reset my password. Can you give me my password? So that's a lot of things that we're aware that maybe other IT or one-man shops are not, to better secure our customers. So any form of penetration testing as well, they'll social engineer themselves into their office, which has happened, to the extent that they're an IT guy or a new employee of the IT company is very common, and just to plug in a USB in any computer or server, you're starting to see that now these days.
Wow. So I guess they're always kind of a step ahead of the game.
They're always coming up with different methodologies. Now, what's happening in bigger organizations is, obviously companies are more aware of cyber and the risk.
Mm-hmm.
So now what's happening is these threat actors are approaching disgruntled, low-paying employees, saying, "Hey, I'll pay you X amount if you stick this thumb drive or
Wow.
execute this file." That way they can gain access into that organization.
Incredible. Ethical hacking. What is that? And do you do that? Does your company do that?
So yeah, I mean, basically, you approach businesses and say, hey, I can access your Wi-Fi from the outside of your organization. These are your open ports. This is how I'm able to get in, and basically present this data to them, so that in efforts to help their organization and gain that customer as well.
Now we're living in an age of not only cyber crime, but it seems like cyber criminals now have a new friend in AI. What have you learned about it? What can you tell us about AI as it applies to cybersecurity, and where's it all going?
Right. Yeah. Definitely, AIs have been a big impact in everyone's lives right now. We use it primarily to write for scripting. That's helped us a lot with extensive automation that we use to help us with the demand that we have. Not only that, but creating blogs, articles for awareness, to educate our customers, even for policies. A lot of insurances mandate policies and stuff like that, where we curate BYOD, bring your own device policies, et cetera, incidents response. So we'll help bridge that gap with AI.
How about our phones? What's going on with our phones, it seems again, we're more subject to attacks on our phones. And what is uh, what is going on with security with phones? I know we're getting updates or requests for updates pretty frequently. What do those updates do?
Right. Those are efforts to bridge the gap between the severe vulnerabilities, basically, that phones or even computers have. So they're constantly, threat actors are constantly trying to find avenues to further attack and infiltrate infrastructures. So the moment they find gaps in the code, um, vendors or providers such as Apple are constantly closing or further securing the gap by these firmwares and updates that they provide, basically.
So we talked about one way of getting into a computer system, a network, is just putting a USB drive into a server or whatever it may be. What are some other ways that bad actors get into a network or a server?
The most common is from organizations that have remote workers. One assessment we did a year ago for a condominium building, we found threat actors at that moment pinging on or knocking on their server door. Basically, the RDP port was open, so at that
What is that, the RDP?
it's basically a port they access to get into that server that basically allows you to access that server, so you can basically work and access the accounting platform that I mentioned in the story
Got it.
previously. So they found that port open, and now they had access to the server itself. And at that point, it was just a guessing game of the username and password, which is that's at the point that we're at. So I presented that to them, and we quickly proceeded to mitigate and remediate the threats, basically.
So let's say I get hacked. I am a victim of ransomware. What do I do next? What should I do and what shouldn't I do?
Right. Well, rip the cables out of the wall first and foremost. So
Really,
you start you prevent further spread of the ransom. So especially if you have like on-prem backups, you want to avoid that ransom getting to that. Um, Second, obviously, let the FBI know or report it so that they can further investigate that and basically help the industry advance in stopping cybercrime. But definitely, if you do have backups at that point in cloud, you proceed to restore from that, wipe everything, even go to the extent of getting new machines, and then
That
restore.
critical, huh?
Yeah, because sometimes some of this stuff comes from like the firmware or even hard coded in servers, etc. So I think it's best just to you can wipe it. You're probably safe, but I would probably recommend the extent of getting new machines and just restoring and recovering from that point.
Is there insurance for this?
There is insurance, but cyber insurance policies are getting strict with how you're putting claims in now. So basically, cybersecurity firms are feeling the wrath of this as well because, or have risk as much as risk as the organization does, because insurance companies are putting policies in place where if that server wasn't patched to the latest or have the latest updates or you have this port open, they're not going to pay out that policy. So, and if they do, what's happening is like, hey, Carlos, we'll pay you out, but who's your cybersecurity firm? We're going to subpoena them and go after them.
So you're liable as well.
So we're liable as well. And you're starting to see that more and more.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, different times, definitely.
Very different times. You mentioned backing up in the cloud. Can a hacker get to my backup in the cloud?
So yes, there's no 100% proof security. So, I mean, obviously, if they have your username and password, they can access it. So that's why air gap comes into place, where it's something that, whether it's local, it can be accessed by anyone really, especially these threat actors. But you also have immutable backups in the cloud where it writes it once, and therefore it's not able to write again to it. So it's just readable. So those are other technology areas that are being evolved in the industry as well.
So what you're suggesting is that, let's say I have two on-premise, two
Backup copies.
backup copies. So one of them back up, unplug, right?
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, whether it's weekly, you can do something to that extent because in an attack, you're as good as your last backup, right? So
Absolutely.
if your cloud is compromised and your local is compromised, you could rely on that air gapped backup copy. Even if it's a week old, you have data. You have something to recover by.
Yeah, I have to admit I've been hacked. Not my network or my computer, but one of my social media accounts.
Oh man, was it that Amazon free gift card?
No. It was, you got to see these photos,
Oh jeez.
and it was from somebody I knew.
Oh, usually happens.
Yeah. So anyway, so I hear you're an author and you brought your book.
Definitely.
Go ahead and hold it up.
So-
Show it to the camera.
Yeah, this is something I co-authored with a couple other IT guys
Okay.
in efforts to bring awareness to the industry. And I have that story in there in some ways. It's
Which story?
the CPA firm
Okay.
story, and basically some areas to focus on and implement in your organization if you haven't already.
So how expensive or inexpensive are some of these measures for a small business? For example, getting better password protection, a password manager. Is it expensive, inexpensive?
You know, it's something that we offer in our managed services. But definitely not expensive to implement at your home or anything like that. Very small cost to pay for security to protect your family. In essence, if they hack your bank account, you basically lose quite a bit, and they can go beyond that as well. Hacking your social, create identity theft, and just the list is long.
Yeah. I've had a couple of clients have their social accounts hacked, and it was impossible to get it
Right.
back. Just absolutely impossible.
Yeah, definitely. So another way is just getting monitoring your credit, right? So locking that and making sure that that in the event that happens, they're not able to use your credit or any form, and you're getting that alert, so you have a better idea where that's coming from.
Yeah. Any other tips and tricks, whether it's for consumers or for businesses, that they should do to keep themselves safe?
I think awareness is, number one. So when you're, approaching, like you said, that email, that rogue email, check the headers, check like who it's coming from. That's a good indicator that it's a phishing attempt. I got one this morning from a customer. Hey, it was an invoice, and it looked legit. I downloaded the file, put it through a scanner, and it said it had several detections for malware and ransom. So I quickly called them and, hey, do not open this, please. Just delete the email. So just the simple awareness is basically a good form to just be vigilant and for this stuff, because it's present in every day of our lives.
Going back to the CPA, do you find that attitude kind of prevalent where people are just like, not, I guess the way to say it is he wasn't really very concerned about it. Is that what you see most of the time, or are people starting to wake up kind of?
I think most businesses are starting to wake up. If the business is at risk, they have the ability to go out of business if they get impacted. So they're more cognizant of that now in terms of protection stuff. When I do assessments for businesses, I am still seeing organizations not even having 2FA implemented. Just not even the basic baseline of cybersecurity. which is still shocking, especially the bigger organizations. Like you would think they would know
Right,
better.
right.
But I do see smaller businesses implementing and being proactive on that sense.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Felipe, believe it or not, we're out of time. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure learning about cybersecurity, such a
Sure.
hot topic.
Absolutely.
Artificial intelligence too, and how that works into this. And hopefully you're going to protect a lot of companies out there.
Awesome. We'll do. We'll strive to.
All right.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. And thanks for joining us today. And thanks as always to Community News for this forum. We'll see you next